Hi, all. Welcome to the IPS demographics data site. Um, when you initially come to the site, you're presented with this screen, this map basically of the IPS school district with dots representing the schools that were in the data period from 2002 to 2013. Generally speaking, schools with fewer than 3 years aren't included in this. As you see at the top of the right-hand side of the screen, it says, please use the menu buttons to the left to explore the analysis and findings of this data. Let's mouse over the icons. The very top one is the synopsis and the introduction. There's been an effort, even though this data really doesn't present itself well in a sequential order, there's an attempt to try to put together all of our thoughts in some sort of a sequence. So we start off with a synopsis and an introduction. Then we talk about how this project came about and somewhat of a project overview. And after you know that, you wonder, well, what is our thesis statement? What is it we're trying to prove or disprove? And then going on from there, we give the steps that we took to arrive at our conclusions. And I guess the key point is the map here and some discussion about how to use that. And the next icon is about the data that we used. Data sources were varied. Much of the data is or was collected and presented on federal websites, and some of it was presented on state websites, and other key points of data come from other sources. And our next icon is where we do analysis and presentation. Moving down, any analysis, has to be in some sort of a context. What does this data mean? Is it real? And going from that, we talk about our findings and conclusions. And this is a section you should spend some time with and give some thought to. And this section here is like the reports. Many of us like websites because they allow us to explore data and situations in our own way. But in the report section, you can go to something that's a little bit like a white paper, and you can just go through it, you can print it and mull over it. And also, there's a section here where you can contact us. This is a work in progress, and we hope to have annual updates and make some adjustments to it and actually improve it. And I'm going to go back in a second and I'm going to go through each of these menu options in some detail. But if for whatever reason you just want a quick start guide to the site, we do have a YouTube video that traces you through this, so you can stop it, pause it, and it'll give you a much better view of what's going on. Having said that, looking at the map, there was an attempt to place each school into a category. And what we did was we took the maximum percentage of black enrollment during this time period, and we broke it into 4 groups. And what we're saying is if a school never exceeded 25%, we have that color coded basically as white. And if it was between 76 and 100%, we color coded that as black. And those that were 26 to 50, they were green. Those were 51 through 75 are red. Let's stop and think about it. The overall percentage of black students in IPS is much higher than the percentage of the population in the IPS region. So for a school to never exceed 25% population, um, that's a sticking point right there. But we'll go into this in much further detail later on. So earlier I promised you I would talk about what was behind these icons to the left. Let's take a look at the introduction. The key points of this whole site is we're calling for school level data to be provided. And we're keeping two things in mind. In God we trust, all others bring data, and follow the money. Quite a bit of money gets spent in our school district. Although money and outcome are not necessarily guaranteed, they are indicators, particularly if you're paying the taxes and your child is not receiving a quality education, and other people in your district, their children are receiving a quality education. Then yes, resources is a major issue. So here's our introduction. The next one is about the project, and the key driver from this project is when the IPS board made a decision to reclassify Shortridge High School to a IB school, International Baccalaureate. Hereafter that, this is going to be referred to as the eviction of black students to make room for non-black students. So that's what started this project. And so the whole question is, there's not quite a lot of data known about our school district to the general public. And this is an attempt to make data available with the hope that as more and more data like this is made available to the general public, that our school district will actually start to provide data to people because they have the data and the general public does not. Then moving forward, there's some background about how we decided to look at what data was publicly available or is publicly available. We did some analysis of the schools. We broke them out into different categories, mainly based upon the percentage of black students. And we go on from there. And here are our steps that we took. Let me click that down. And we're looking at several parts of data, and we came up with how to derive a cost per student statistic for each of the schools and give some thought about that. The key problem is there is no actual expense data really available to the general public. Budget data for a few years is available. In the budgets, they have a problem. But even in the budget, there's a high percentage of the total budget, operating budget, is for central office expenses. And I urge every parent that looks at this site to look at the central office expenses and give some thought about how much of those expenses you think benefited your child. And I think that is what is going to hit home for many parents. The money that our school system spends that doesn't go to our students. So that brings us to about the map. Okay. And this map is can be used for a lot of things. The biggest thing is everybody thinks that the school system as a whole is less effective than their individual school. And so this gives you a chance to look at your individual school. Let me click, I'm going to click that down, and I just happened to click on a school, and this was a Center for Inquiry school. And here you see from 2002 to 2013, and there's a lot of NAs in here because uh, of the way the data was set out and the way it got combined. But generally speaking, this was from budget data, and in 2010 we had the salaries, the benefits, and this, that, and the other. And in some cases, down here you'll see there's no child left behind report card for that school. I'm going to click on that and hope that it comes through. Not all schools will have these items at the bottom. And it depends upon the browser that you're looking at. Some of these external sites that I go to require Flash to be available, and if you don't have Flash, you'll get something that says, something's not loaded. But these items, as you can see, are from the Indiana State website. So I'd encourage you to look around in the map and just look at, earlier I had mentioned that the central office expenses on all of these individual schools, I've included the central office expenses in each one of the individual schools because we don't know what the allocation of those are. So if you click on the central office expenses not included link, you'll get a chance to see what expenses were budgeted for the central office. And as I mentioned earlier, we never have access to actual expenses, so operating expenses. So there's no way to know how real this data is. Okay, and also depending upon the computer you're using, the click down this pop-up. And the next menu icon is about the data. We've just categorized about 20 or so data sources that we went to, and there are other references that we did to get textual information. And we analyze this data with open source software, and some things were done with Excel. In some cases, the data was in a PDF file. We had to convert it to something that we could use. And ultimately, all of this information, we distilled it down and we put it into bubble charts and motion bubble charts. And those appear in the next section. Here in the analysis, we've done some charts. The first four are motion charts. And they're pretty busy because there's about 75 schools that we're following over a 10-year period. So in this example, because we're recording the stream, I'll go to this third one because it only has 18 schools in it. And give you a little bit of an overview of how these charts work and what they do, and to some degree how to interpret them. Here we go. The chart opens up and you sort of take a peek at the title, and 18 IPS schools, the cost per student by percentage of black students. So on the x-axis, we have the percentage of black students. And as you'll notice on this chart, it goes from 0 to 50. So these 18 schools, none of them ever exceeded more than 50% black students. And behind the data behind these bubbles, you can get to it one by one just by mousing over the bubble, or if you click the data tab, you'll actually see like an Excel type data table. See if I can get to them. Okay, there it is. And you scroll over that and you can see the data that is behind the charts. Okay, but going back to the chart, we have the cost per student, and this includes the central office expenses in every one of those schools, and construction expenses that are available to us. And so you see that goes from basically 0 to 24,000. And here on the x-axis is the percentage of black students. So the question becomes, so what's the motion? Well, the motion is, okay, double click to go back to the beginning. The motion is taking these statistics through the time period from 2002 to 2004. As you can see, you can drag this thing down here. So like, here's 2002, 2003, and you see new schools coming in and what their actual cost per student is. We're at 2006 now. So you can follow this, and so if you fixate on a particular bubble, you can see how it moves across both of these axes over time. So I think that's the thing of interest, particularly once you've singled out a school or a group of schools. Okay, one other point. In some cases on these charts, if you enlarge it, that helps to be able to follow along better. Our next bullet point, our menu item, is placing the data in context, time and place. And in looking at this data, for now, let's just say that when we look at the percent of black population by precinct, and we color code that. You'll see that generally on the diagonal, the southern half of the school district is less than 25%, pretty much uniformly. So that's an issue that has to be a key challenge for our school district, how to work with that. And so that's a given, and we understand that that is there. It can't really be denied. So the whole point of this section is other considerations factored into our analysis and conclusions. You know, at the top I mentioned that the percentage of black population in the IPS school district population is 27%. The population of students is 55%. So as we go over here and we look at this maximum percentage by enrollment for each of these schools, generally speaking across the board, they generally all should be red dots, but we see that they're not. So that's a confounding factor in how we determine if there is disparity in the school district. Now, early on we said that 25% of the district population is black, yet 55% of the students are black. So the whole issue of charter schools and private schools comes into play. And in this analysis for now, we've excluded this. Going forward, we will fold that data in, but that is for a much later release of this. And finally, being in Indiana, we have the checkered flag as being what our conclusions and findings are. And one thing that comes up so often is there's a churning of the leadership in our school district. And so it can always be said, oh, well, we just got here. Well, for the parents and students that hang in for 12 years with IPS, that just doesn't cut it. You know, we're sort of like trustees, we're lifers here. So the last two bullets here relate to audit reports that happened pretty much at the change of the last, I'll call it regime. Earlier I mentioned that if you just want a printer-friendly version of this report, it's available here. And if you just want to, rather than doing all the clicking on the individual icons, you can get a report that has viewable links in it. And once again, please contact us, with all of your comments, whether they be positive or negative, because we need to hear it. And, some of them we may have an explanation for, and some of them, it could be that we need to make some revisions along those lines. And this is a huge subject. We're looking at 70 plus schools over a 10-year period, and we're looking at a lot of complicated data, and we're looking at data that's really not there. So I suggest that you go through this one or two times, and at least once look at the video that repeats this over and over again, so that you can get a good feel for what's going on. So once again, I thank you in advance for all of your comments and suggestions, and please dig into this further and contact me with any item that you have related to public schools in Indianapolis and their funding. Thank you.